You're listening to Awards Magnet, a Gold Derby podcast. Subscribe weekly for new episodes during Emmys and Oscar season, interviews with top awards contenders, and special monthly mailbag episodes. Email us at slugfests@goldderby.com. Now, on to the show. Welcome back to Awards Magnet. I'm Christopher Rosen. I'm joined by Joyce. And Joyce, we were off last week, but we got a special 2 episodes this week.
And the first one up is with a very, very special guest. One of our faves.
One of our faves. We truly love him. Paul W. Downs, talking about the incredible penultimate episode of season 4 of Hacks. Let's talk a little about this episode, Joyce, first, before we get to our great conversation with Paul.
Man, we had to say spoiler alert, right? We had to say spoiler alert?
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
If you haven't watched this week's episode of Hacks, turn off this show and then come back in like 35 minutes. Joyce, that was maybe the best episode they've ever done.
Definitely up there with the season 3 finale. Right. Yeah. I mean, pending whatever they do in season 5. But yeah, this is top tier all the way. And in our conversation with Paul, you literally asked, is this the most important episode of the show?
But this enthusiasm that we have for it is clear in the interview because, man, I love it so much. I was like, this show, when I watched that episode, I was like, I watched it, Joyce. You watched the screeners before me. And then I got them, and I remember watching it at the hotel at CinemaCon. Because remember, I went to CinemaCon this year.
Yeah, and then you were texting me about it, overnight, basically, because while I was asleep. So,
it was so
I woke up to the texts,
and I couldn't wait to watch it. It was a different time zone, working really hard, running around, doing all this bullshit. And then, watching on my phone, I was like, "This is the greatest." I was texting you, "This is the greatest thing I've ever seen." It was so good, and I watched it again. Watched it 3 or 4 times. I think it's just the best. I think if the Hacks ends up winning Best Comedy Series again at the Emmys in September, this episode will be a large reason why.
Yeah, and this should be their writing submission too.
Yes, I think it would be.
So yeah, Paul and Lucia Agnello and Jen Statsky, co-creators, wrote it too. So, I mean, there's one more episode left, the finale, which is also an excellent episode. But this is also something we mentioned in the interview. This is their penultimate episode. They're going full Game of Thrones here.
Yes.
It's the big one is the penultimate episode. And it could have also served as a finale. But,
very well could have.
Yeah. And we also talk about that too in the interview.
I would say this too, in terms of why I think the episode will be, when I watched it even, I was like, oh, the message of this episode, I think, and obviously we could talk freely about it because if you're listening still or watching, you don't care about being spoiled or you have already watched it. The thing I love about this episode is that you have Deborah really speaking to, I think, a lot of anxieties that a lot of the people in the creative community feel about Hollywood right now in terms of hey, I'm, and having it, we kind of talked about this with Paul, but just so I don't want to step on it too much, but having Deborah be the messenger of I am, she says, a capitalist pig, but just the idea that she is obviously such a business-minded person and is a creative, but obviously so focused on her business and knows about money and knows the business is a business. It's show business, not show friends, right? That even she is this is going too far and the corporate interference is too much and we're really killing creatives. I was like, that's a message that I think will really respond with the Television Academy and people who make TV shows for a living.
Yes, for sure. And yeah, I mean, this season is about art versus commerce, right? We've talked about this before with the show and also with the studio as well, because similar themes, but as we've also talked about, they approach it completely different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the way, in this episode that Hacks did it, I think it's really resonant, right? It's a very emotional scene. The show is very funny, of course, but the Jean's monologue, I think really gets at the heart of the issue too. And I think, yeah, she's such a great avatar to deliver that message too, because you said, she says, I'm a capitalist pig, right? She has always seen the bottom line herself too, but in a different type of vocation, because she was her own businesswoman. She was just a comedian. She was her own boss. But in season 4, she's working in the corporate world and she sees how it's so much different there with the red tape and everything. And that's really what's happening to the creative community with, Silicon Valley, all these tech giants and everyone stepping over creatives. And then you have to cater to stakeholders, right? And I think that's very relatable to what the industry is going through. And yeah, Paul talks about this as well, and how they wanted to deliver that message to their peers, really.
In terms of like Hacks in the Studio, which I feel like we remain, at least for me, those remain like probably at this point the top two contenders, like for best comedy series, and their approaches. We've danced around this, but now that Hacks is at episode 9 and the studio's actually ended right this week as well, you get the thing I really realized talking about this is like Hacks is about like the creative. Hacks is about like the people who make TV, and obviously the studio is about like making heroes out of the executives who are kind of caught in the middle.
Yeah, the executives have good intentions.
So like it's treating the executives with respect and good faith, but they're also like still like it's not from the perspective of the creatives, even though it's made by creatives who are really, really great creatives, right? Like Seth Rogen, I think, is like a modern genius in this field. Like he's really smart and very funny. But I do think the nuanced approach there will be the reason Hacks would have an edge for me, because I just think it's easier to root for Deborah and Ava than it is to root for Matt if you're pitching shows.
Yeah. And then also in terms of Hacks too, like we talked about this with Paul, they also have, Winnie Landell, Helen Hunt's character, who is like she gets fired because of Deborah, but like her scene in this episode, it's like she was like, I'm not the bad guy here. I'm just doing my job. I used to intern for Terrence Malick, really, right?
Like she's like the Matt of this show. If this is the studio, Winnie is Matt.
Yeah, like she's just doing her job. Like she has no ill intentions towards Deborah. Like she doesn't. She's not out to get Deborah or anything. Like she's just doing her job, just like everyone else is, right? Like there's she's an executive with good intentions. She doesn't want to hurt Deborah in any way. So like that's aspect is also represented in Hacks too.
It's a great episode too for Paul as an actor, which we'll talk about. I think it's like it could be his take too.
Yeah,
he's so funny and it really does a lot of stuff.
Physical acting,
yes, and it's just great. So we were so excited to talk to Paul W. Downs about the season 4, episode 9 of Hacks: A Slippery Slope.
Also great stuff from Julianne Nicholson as well. Dance Mom, love Dance Mom.
He did not boof our interview, Joyce.
I wish he did.
All right, listen to the episode. Listen to the interview we did with Paul W. Downs coming up right now. Just don't go anywhere. It's going to be on right now. Paul W. Downs, the Emmy Award-winning co-creator, co-showrunner, executive producer, writer, director, and star of Hacks. Just a few things.
There's a couple things. And that made your job harder.
We're also excited to talk to you about this episode. Obviously, I feel like the whole show maybe has been leading to this episode. It was like, is this the most? I wrote down, is this the most important episode of Hacks yet? Because you finally got to this moment that the show's been building for, where Deborah has to choose Ava. And I guess like, did it feel that important to you guys in the writing process? Just to start there.
Yes, I mean it is the most pivotal episode of the series so far. You're right. It's it's really the first time Deborah chooses a relationship over her career, puts Ava first. And also, it allowed us in this episode to really address a lot of the stuff that we meditate on in the season around the changes in the television industry. So there was a lot. This was one we thought a lot about and spent a lot of time on.
Well, I know when you guys pitched the show, you know how the whole series would end. So did you always know this is how Late Night with Deborah Vance would end? And this entire run of hers on Late Night would just be in season 4 until episode 9.
We knew that she would be kind of like chasing this white whale of Late Night, and we knew that she would ultimately get that job. And we did also know that we wanted it to be a chapter in the story. We didn't want to like just watch her be a late night host, because there's a lot to explore. It's a very rich area for us to think about and write about. But we also didn't want to sit in late night and just be watching late night, because there's a lot of great late night people should watch. So we also knew that it was going to be something that ultimately she would walk away from. A lot of those details we had to figure out. But when we pitched the show, we did pitch, yes, that she ultimately gets her white whale and that she ends up stepping away. So we did know that. But we actually, I think, it might have been pitched that she would get late night in season 3 initially. There are certain things that, even though we knew the big tentpoles, the exact way we got there or the amount of time we spent there, those kind of variables changed in the writer's room.
You mentioned there before also about like using this episode to talk about things that you guys talk about a lot, about the industry, and obviously like the way, corporations are affecting creatives and all these different things. I guess one of the things I loved about this episode is, did it feel subversive almost to have Deborah saying this stuff as a capitalist pig? Like, she calls herself, and like obviously a tremendous boomer. So she's like speaking to maybe the people who are watching this who are in those positions of power, and maybe they would take it more seriously coming from her than they would from a character like Ava, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, she absolutely straddles the line, right? She is, as she says, a capitalist pig. She's somebody who made a name for herself, not just in comedy, but she obviously had her line of products, and she, worked in QVC, and she really does use her wealth and her objects to sort of protect herself. Those are markers of her success to her. So she certainly understands that perspective. But as she says, at the end of the day, I'm a comedian and I'm here to make people laugh. And that is the thing that she loves to do and wants to do. And she says the dream changed, because as much as this has been the dream, to do the dream today, when our industry has been so disrupted by tech and by, just being a part of publicly traded conglomerates that have shareholders to answer to. I mean, and, she actually, I think, we were able to put in her mouth things that we think about, which is this industry has been a profitable industry for a century. This was not a broken industry, because people want entertainment. They want stories. Since the dawn of language, we've wanted stories. And for it to be disrupted in the way that it's been disrupted is really a shame, because it's not just enough to make a profit. You can't just make a small profit. In a world where things are, again, publicly traded entities, you have to grow the profit. And so to do that, it's impossible if you don't push down on all of the people, all the crews, all the creatives, all the people that make those stories. So we got to kind of allow her to speak to something that I think we're feeling in the entertainment industry, but I think people are feeling in any industry where disruption has happened and where corporate greed has impacted the way in which people make things.
Yeah, we all need to find our carpool karaoke.
We do. Unfortunately, we do. We all have, we need a side hustle. Everybody needs a side hustle now. People are like, people have their job and then they're driving Ubers too. So yeah, it's really, I think maybe more relatable than just a showbiz thing, but certainly since this show is about, comedy and making television, it was something that we felt like we had to address.
Yeah, for sure. And I also love like when she does say the dream change, and so did I, because that's also just a commentary on how, when you do get your dream, sometimes like it's not all it's cracked up to be, right? This is not how you envisioned it. And obviously other stuff has happened in her life, like Ava coming to her life since she's had this dream. And I love what she says when she's like, it's a slippery slope. What will they ask of me next? Where is the line? And I was like, that is a callback to the pilot. There is no line. I was like Leo pointing me immediately. So can you talk about writing that, just her speech in general, and like getting all like everything you've just talked about like, the commentary on the industry and how it's never enough, just into that whole speech of hers?
Yeah, I mean, that obviously we thought a lot about, because, we wanted this to sort of be her network moment, the moment where she's like able to speak truth to power, but also, we were able to put in Tony Goldwyn's dialogue at the end, like, people just want to go to bed, and have a laugh before they do. They don't really need to hear your high moral bullshit, because, we want to straddle that line. But I think one of the things that we explored this season is not just what does it mean to get your dream, but what does it mean to get your dream in your 70s? I think a lot of people can relate to the idea that they finally achieved something, but maybe it's at a time when they've outgrown it. We also wanted to explore the glass cliff, what it's like to finally give a woman an opportunity to do something at a time when things have really changed, or it's higher risk because the potential for failure is even greater. And so, that monologue was really something that we thought a lot about. And like I said, we were able to, I think, put in Deborah's mouth a lot of the stuff that we think about in this industry, that it's not just enough sometimes to make people laugh. You have to think about a lot of other things. And what we also got to do in that monologue was speak about the executives and the people on the business side who really do love television, and they love making television and they want to support artists, and yet everybody has someone to answer to. I mean, even Bob Lipka in this episode, Tony Goldwyn's character says, I have a board to answer to and I have to give them something. So, you know, it's almost like we all have people that we have to answer to. And even if we have the best of intentions, like Helen Hunt's character, the way in which you help things succeed sometimes is to ask for a carpool karaoke, you know, as much as that is like
With Anthony Anderson.
Anthony Anderson. Yeah, I think it would do really well, actually. And I like Deborah's idea to do celebrity strip poker. I think that'd be a great spin-off. But
that was good. Yeah, it was good. I like that when I also like you're saying there. I like that when he was like, I work for Terrence Malick. Like I don't want to do this shit. I just thought like all that like you're
She was nominated for an Oscar.
Exactly. I'd be Terrence Malick. That is such a funny line to me.
It's so good.
Even though it's also, yeah, I mean, someone like her moved up in the corporate ranks, but she probably started out doing something that, you know, maybe was much different. And so she is also a part of, she is another cog in late stage capitalism, and she has to do. So it's like, you know, it's like there are people on every side that are trying to make this work, and it's really hard to figure out.
I know, Joyce, and I want to talk about, obviously, you playing Jimmy as well, but I had one more question about this speech for Deborah. Obviously, it cuts off before we hear her message to Bob, and I was like, did you actually write out the whole thing and then cut it off, or did you just, like, not bother?
Okay. After all that writing, we were like, well, we can stop because we are trying. We don't need to.
We got the bulk of it in there. So
I figured, I was just like, oh, I wonder if they actually wrote like this important message to Bob.
We did have a couple of things that we had Jean say just to have feel cut off so that she wasn't just stopping.
Right.
People. So we gave her a couple things, but it wasn't anything written. I wish I could reveal the secret kicker, you know, that mic drop moment, but we always knew we were gonna smash cut to static, and then luckily ShamWow, what I think was the we were like, we're going to cut to a commercial that's really loud, and that's going to also sort of be a metaphor for what's happening, you know. It's like this consumer product is going to pop up at the end, but that was really tricky because we also, you know, we had so many things to service in that monologue too, because we were cutting back to Ava, who was watching in the security booth. We were cutting to Bob Lipka trying to shut it down, Jimmy. We were cutting to the writers and all of the audience watching. I mean, there were a lot of moving parts. So also kudos to Lucia and Yellow, who directed the episode, because there were so many things to do, but you also really wanted to be with Deb. But I thought it really seamlessly worked, that you felt like you were on a journey with her, even though you did get to see it through the eyes of a lot of our characters.
Well, this is obviously also a big episode for Jimmy. And I mean, like season 4 in general is, I love how it's just about just the whole team being in the corporate world and how and starting new jobs and how that's also affected Jimmy. Like there's the pressure of starting your own company, right? And then he's always been a nice guy and he's not a shark like Deborah or Kayla. So that's always also like the dichotomy and like the mirror images of those two duos. And he has a breakdown in this episode. You drive a golf cart onto Lancashire. How did you guys develop this, like build up to this storyline for him? And what was it like for you? Just go, you play a lot of different modes in this episode, like from the breakdown and then to a lot of physical comedy later on too. So what was it like building this arc for Jimmy?
Well, I mean, you really nailed it. We really think of Jimmy and Kayla as sort of this bizarro version of Deborah and Ava. You know, they are their own duo, but we always try and dovetail their stories and have them reflect the larger themes that we're dealing with in the season. And so this season, you know, it's one thing if you work at a management company and have to deal with the culture there, or deal with the downward pressure if it is, again, a publicly traded company. But now they're starting their own. So there's all the pressures of like being a startup, being a sort of this fledgling management company. But also he's dealing with the stress of Deborah and Ava having the grist they have in the beginning of the season. So he's under a tremendous amount of pressure. Plus, Kayla's now become a manager and has her own ideas about what that means. You know, they have very different management styles. She goes guerrilla mode. He leads with love. But yeah, this was such a fun episode because Jimmy got to really, I mean, he was on a real emotional roller coaster. He's trying to keep it together. He obviously has all the physical comedy with Dance Mom, you know, going on a bender and then wanting to do coke to straighten out. That was such an...
You got to boof it.
You got to boof it. I mean, hey, imagine Julianne Nicholson had pitched that. Julianne Nicholson saying, Jimmy is so funny to me.
She's perfect. She needs an Emmy for this. Like, she's just absolutely perfect as Dance Mom.
I could say I am in heaven because the fact that she said yes, you know, she is such a gifted actress, And we really wanted someone who had like the chops to like play it in a very grounded, very real way, because it was such an over the top, like pants down, crazy character. And the fact that she said yes, and she was like, I am so happy that someone asked me to do something where I'm not weeping. I haven't lost a child. I haven't had to cover up a murder. Like she's like, this is such a different thing. But she was so funny and so game. And it was Megan Stalter and I had such a blast in the scenes with her. But yeah, Jimmy really he has a lot to do in this episode. There's a lot on the line, and he almost dies, let's be honest. He almost in a chimney driving onto Lancashire, which we actually did, which is crazy. They actually,
Wow.
we had stunt doubles do it, but I also did it.
You're like, I want to do my own stunts, like Tom Cruise. So
I don't actually, but they were like, all right, on this one, we're going to be in front of the cart, so we're going to have you do it. Lucia was like, all right, so you're going to drive this. But it's like, with the cars? We're not going to CGI the cars? It's like, no, the car can be there.
it's practical. So
Hey, if I can be the Tom Cruise of comedy, Well,
I mean, I think your best physical acting is when you grab Dan's mom's purse and you throw it onto your shoulder and walk out. That was beautiful.
thank you so
Well
much.
done.
I appreciate that. We found on the day. That was just like I had to take the purse, and then why not wear it out,
It reminded me of when Joey had his bag on Friends. Like
Wow.
that. Yeah.
Okay, classic. That's legend stuff. Okay, thank you. It's funny, we don't typically rehearse scenes. We don't really have the time. We move really fast. We shoot a lot of pages in a day. We do a lot of alt. So there's not a ton of time to sit and rehearse. But that was one scene that, because there was so much physical comedy in it, it was so choreographed between like running to the door, cutting the coke, getting her out of the ice bucket. And obviously resets are so tricky with cocaine and ice water and all that stuff, that we did rehearse that scene the night before. And so it was very, there was not really a lot of room for improvisation because it was very, very choreographed. People had to knock on the door at the right time. We had to get her into the couch at the right time. She had to knock into a cart. There was stunts. It was like a lot going on. But that was the one thing, I'm glad you called it out, Joyce, because that was the one thing that there was a little bit of discovery on the day, and that was one of those moments. So
It's my favorite. It's a low key great moment because there's other big moments everyone's gonna talk about. But I'm like, no, it's the purse. And then you're still wearing it when you're talking to Rob outside.
I feel very seen. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. That moment and my almost biting Julianne was the other thing that just kind of happened, which was
I love this when you walk up on her in Wisteria Lane and you're like, Mary Alice, what did you do? I really truly laughed out loud multiple times watching this.
Thank you.
So
Thank you
good.
so much. And obviously you get the reference. I have to say,
Obviously.
I think Ariel Carlin pitched that in the room because we realized in writing 9 that we had never named Dan's mom. And typically, like, if sometimes when you're breaking a story, you refer to a character like that as Dan's mom, and then you go back and after you decide the name, you weave it in. And I think we were breaking 9. We were like, oh, we should never reveal the name. We should never say her name until we're on Mysterio Lane. I'm glad it hit. We didn't know how many people it hit for, but it seems like people who have seen the episode.
Real ones will get it.
That's
so.
You talk about your performance, and obviously, one of the things I love about this episode, just in general, is, and Joyce maybe would laugh at me because, I think the tension as a viewer, I was like, I still wasn't sure what Deborah was going to do, even when she walked out. Right. And even though I'm like, oh, of course, she's probably not going to do Ava dirty again, I was still like, maybe she will. And a large part of that is because I think you, as Jimmy, you never give it up, right? And even in the scene when she's comes to you right before she goes on, and you're like, you kind of had to do it. You had to do this. And I was wondering how you kind of thought about playing that to not give it up because Jimmy's obviously, like we're saying, he's like a warm person, right? He's very kind. He's
the nicest guy in showbiz.
Very nice, but you still have to so you can't be maybe typical Jimmy there. I guess how did you kind of think of that moment, and how many versions of that did you try before you found the right version of it to make it feel still a tension moment for the audience?
You guys are the best viewers of the show. That was something that we had many versions of. We tried many versions of that particular moment because you're right. That was kind of it was really tricky because you don't want to tip it one way or the other. You don't want to overly be, mustache twirly and make it seem like she's definitely done something sinister. And you don't want it to seem like, okay, we're about to blow up the show. We're in cahoots in some way. So it was very, very tricky because we didn't want to push the misdirect. We wanted to make it a little bit neutral. And so there were a bunch of different versions of it. I'm trying to think of some of them. The one we ultimately landed on was, I think she'll understand. And
You say, I don't think you had a choice. Yeah.
We had ones that were, am I doing the right thing? And it says, I don't think you have a choice. Trying to think of some of the others on the day. Because like I said, there were ones that we tried. The one that's on screen, and this typically happens, is the one that was scripted. But we did try a bunch because, yeah. And I was very aware. I think the way that I played it when I was thinking about it was I was playing it as if she was fired, because knowing the truth of the scenario and what she was about to do, it was very hard not to be like, poof, okay, you're about to go out on television. And
technically they're all fired.
Yeah,
it's like they're all gone.
Exactly. Which is, again, that was another thing that was a really fine needle to thread when Deborah comes to Jimmy and says, I need to clue you in on something because it affects you. And it's something I really don't want to do. The audience hopefully is like, oh no, is she gonna, because there was an ultimatum given to her that you have to fire Ava. So, we assume the audience would feel that way. But I'm glad that you weren't 100% sure, because
I think like that's because of what happens in 6 is like, that was the question, right? Is like, will she let Ava down again? So I think that's always like, is she or not? And I think that's what you guys do so well. And I mean, we have to wrap up here, but I felt like this episode, unfortunately, I know we could talk to you forever, but we have so many questions about the finale as well, but we won't get to them here. But this episode could have served as the season finale. Like it really could have, like the 18-month non-compete, like what's she going to do next? But the finale itself is also great. There's a lot of stuff that happens there. But what went into the decision to make this the penultimate episode? This is like your Game of Thrones, like Battle of the Bastards.
Because you guys have bugged the writer's room. This is really wild. It was the finale initially. This was the finale. We even considered we considered a couple of things. One, we considered it going out on the static, that it's like, well, what happened there? We also considered going out on We Own You. We have a non-compete. But then we thought, why are we delaying that? Why not show, because we also wanted, we felt it was really important to have Deborah grieve and to show her grieving, and to show her grieving right after. And it gave Jean so much to do. I think Jean does some of her best work in 9, in that monologue. She's so good. And she was so, it's funny. I mean, you should ask her about it, but she was like, she said to us afterwards, she's like, I didn't really have to do much in that because I so felt it. And saying things like, I got my dream and the dream changed. I think like she's felt what we've all felt in the changes that have happened in the industry. And I think, obviously playing this part has meant a great deal to her. So she really, I think, is so good in that monologue. But I can't believe you asked that, because we did consider it.
It's just great. We have to wrap up there with Paul W. Downs, an Emmy winner for Hacks. Hopefully more Emmys in the future here for an incredible 4th season. Thanks for doing this.
Appreciate it. Thank you for watching it and for watching it so much.
Of course. Can't wait for season 5.
Yeah, I know.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Awards Magnet, a Gold Derby podcast. Like what you heard? Leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Awards Magnet is produced by Andrew Merrill. Our logo is designed by Chelsea Sikora. Please like and subscribe to stay on top of all the awards news, and email us at slugfests@goldderby.com.